everybody, and welcome back to the Choose to Think Inspirational Podcast. I'm Victoria, your host, and it's so delightful to have you here. I want to tell you about our guest today named Bill Mullin. He is president of Significant Media and Music. He's a visionary in the world of music and storytelling. You're going to love him. With a career spanning from rock and roll, drumming to studio engineering and music production, Bill has shaped the soundtrack of major films like The Pelican Brief, Wyatt Earp, and Gilmore Girls. Most recently, he spearheaded As I Recall Forever, which is a groundbreaking musical podcast, or podcast musical, I should say, that blends rock opera with immersive storytelling, aiming to inspire personal and spiritual growth. He's a devoted follower of Christ, and he sees music as a powerful tool for reflection, connection, and faith expression. His deep commitment to discipleship extends to serving on missions boards, supporting women's recovery homes, and engaging in faith-based communities. Based in Kansas City, he celebrates 40 years of marriage to his equally artistic and accomplished wife. I had so much fun just listening to Bill's story. He talked a lot about the podcast and how that was birthed, as well as how each episode, there are a finite number of episodes right now, and how that kind of all was pieced together, and the integration that he has of the music and the storytelling and the narrative, the thread throughout all of that has a lot to do with faith and God and hope and love and relationship. All of these are themes that we talk a little bit about. It's just fascinating to listen to him, to hear his story, his heart for God. And he's been around the block, so to speak. He's a man of vastly varying degrees of suffering in his life. So he's extremely relatable. And he has such a sweet and tender message for you, especially toward the very end of the show as we chat. It's a lengthy chat and conversation that we had, but you're going to end on such a note of real, inspiration that you can grab hold of that will be meaningful in your life, especially if you kind of find yourself struggling a little bit these days. He's someone who could really relate, and his message is relatable, kind of tangible and palpable, and something that you could say, yeah, he's someone I really want to get to know. And you're going to want to, for sure, listen to his podcast. Again, his podcast is called As I Recall Forever. And his music, I don't want you to miss the music. You can go to his YouTube channel called Next Humanity. There's several videos there that are really just taking off. So please, without further ado, I'd like you to welcome Bill Mullin. Welcome, first of all, Bill, to the Choose to Think Inspirational Podcast. We're so glad you're here.
Well, I am glad to be in this moment with you because he's given us the opportunity to have every moment be new.
Amen.
And I approach every time I have the opportunity to be a guest as coming to somebody's house, and you have a purpose and you have a meaningful way of putting things in context for the Lord. So that's an honor for me.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I was so excited to have you on the podcast is because music is, gosh, what would we even do without music? Can you even imagine for a second a world where there was no music? I mean, the thought of that is almost frightful, isn't it?
Well, we can't help but avoid it. It's such a natural part of our entire being, meaning our heartbeats and the voices we hear in the womb murmuring. And in fact, vibration of creation itself, to get at the total physics level, sound is vibration, movement of molecules coming at us. And so everything is vibrating, we know, in this universe, and that's part of God's mystery and majesty, that we are attuned that way, that we actually can go beyond. And music gives us that wonder, it gives us that,
yes,
I can't express myself, but this piece of music sure does it, even if it has lyrics,
right.
and the lyrics are attempting to support a message and or a mood. an emotion. So yeah, it gets at that gut level. It gets at,
It really does.
I say, that whole vibration is beyond our typical senses, you know. It gets us to where our soul is doing the listening. Our soul is being at one. And so, yeah, I love it for that reason, because it wakes me up to that moment that I am here and now. But that's exactly what Christ wants for us. He really wants us to be born again all the time. He wants us to be new in this very moment that you and I are sharing. And that sense is God's presence, that detected in a state of awe or being part of something, reminding us, and that can be between us and nature. I look out my window here, and through the shutters, I'm at the end of the kitchen in a little cove, and there's blue sky and cumulus nimbus, puffy clouds today, and there's apartments, low rise of 4 and 5 stories, and then there's some higher rises, all apartment condo, and there's palm trees, and here I am in winter, warmth. So something like that gives us a sense of presence, his presence, that we're connected with nature, even though it's many, many man-made things I can see around me. And so it's also the connection between us and whether it is music, art, the feats that certain people perform, athletic-wise, or even the feats that you see in people that are recovery, people that you see who have resilience, that are being restored in the Lord. Those are all part of amazing grace. And the greatest for me is between us and that life force. In other words, relationships. So that often drives a lot of what I have to sing and write about. And how can I help but sing when I really know what he's done for me, is give me this perspective.
Yeah. Where are you calling in from, by the way? Would you remind
Fort
me?
Myers Beach, Florida.
You're in Florida. That's what
What
I
a
thought.
blessing,
Okay.
hey?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's wonderful.
there was 0 and there was -1 back in Kansas City, checking the weather while I was down here just to feel good.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Yeah, I'm in Kentucky, and we've
Oh,
actually
yeah.
got delightful weather today. It's like in the east, very sunny and
Well,
a little
good.
windy and kind of chill, with a little chill, but it's beautiful outside. So, and I'm going to go back just a little bit to the power of music. When I think, as a 21st century Christian woman, and being so at various stages of my life, so the emotions that sometimes just feel overwhelming to me, I get into my amygdala, that area of my brain that kind of really can take charge sometimes, not in the best way. But when I'm really feeling out of sorts, when I'm feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, agitated, if I start getting the grumblies and start griping, I notice all those things about myself. And there are a couple things that really help me to kind of flip the switch on that. And one of those things would be showing gratitude and kind of saying, okay, hold on, Victoria, stop with all this mess in your brain, this confusion, this doubt, this grumbling, whatever it might be, taking me to a dead end street, really. And what can you be thankful for? I'll ask myself that. What can you really praise God about right now? You mentioned just even the view, what you're looking at right now, and that dynamic of, gosh, here I am, a human being in this amazing world that God created. And that's a way to even appreciate that, because you're stopping for a moment and you're noticing, you're saying, thank you, Lord, for these palm trees, this beautiful sky. I mean, things as simple as that can cause an extreme shift in your brain and your focus. The other thing that helps me tremendously is listening to praise and worship music. And suddenly that captivates my thoughts in a way that it's a redirect for me. Have you found, is it that way for you? Is music powerful like that to you to really even just change the course of your mood and emotions, say in a day, in a very positive way? Music can also make us very sad or evoke all kinds of feelings and emotions. But when I feel stuck, I think is what I'm saying, when I feel overwhelmed, when I'm really sad, or maybe I don't know what to do, simply stopping, pausing, and putting on some praise and worship music and allowing those truths and the lyrics and the message just to filter through my brain is a wonderful reboot for me. Have you had that experience too, Bill?
Well, that's difficult to answer because music has been so internalized. And in fact, I can't remember when it hasn't been. Music goes through my mind and is within my natural expression. It's within what, for me, is a way that I document my feelings, what has happened to me. It's also a way that I literally just get things cathartically out of me, you know. And I hope that sometimes when people listen to some of my music, and I'm a real lyric lover, and I'm a storyteller, and so my music is a little different from the praise and worship category per se. My music has been put into a musical, okay? So that in and of itself means that I started to see an arc, a dramatic arc of narrative, finding a thread between these songs I was putting together. But you talk about this chemical cocktail that is within us, that at times we're not conscious, we're not fully here, we're not in the saving grace of the Lord. We get consumed, and there's many, many distractions, or there's many, many challenges, and there's many, many resistance attacks that come upon us. And so, yes, music can be therapeutic, and it can have a sense of listening to something and go, oh, I'm not alone. That person just told a story it's not really my story, but it's similar enough that I can empathize with it and I can count my blessings from it. And that's what I often try to put into all of my songs, some of his hope. And so, yeah, I also don't want to make it something that is be-all, end-all answer, because when I heard you expressing, you need to just get up and get away, that has to do with you just needed to change. You needed to, like, when we go from room to room, and now that I'm older, this happens often. You go to the next room and you're going, what was I going to look for? And that's because our brains actually have a wash. It basically says you're going someplace else, so we're going to wash whatever else was on your mind so that you can be more alert, so that we're going into a new environment and going back to when we were hunters and gatherers on the plains. We had to be aware that it might be a saber-toothed tiger. And so it's at those levels that some of these biological responses control us. And part of our communion with the Spirit is to hold his love so deeply that, we don't lose that part.
Exactly.
So when we do the shift, and so music definitely can be part of that shift. I will go from that spirituality in music into a little bit of what I'm doing, if I may.
Yes. Sure.
This is a part to plug, of course, but it's inviting people to experience it. And I really wanted them to be able to listen to a set of music in long form. And I didn't know exactly how do you do that today. It's really a singles market. It's really Spotify playlist and all of that. And I was missing myself the concept album. I was missing kind of the musicals in some way. I grew up in Philadelphia, and of course musicals along the East Coast often would play Philadelphia before they go to Broadway and all that sort of thing. So I was familiar with that. Although I'm not like a High School Musical kind of kid. I was more of a rock and roller. But regardless, I wanted to have something that could be listened to periodically. In other words, we do binge watch. We do listen to ongoing drama and or anything else. And so that's what I ended up putting this into. That's how I bottled it, so to speak. And it's called As I Recall Forever. So what the heck does that mean? As I recall forever. How can you recall forever? Seems like it's, contradictory. And so forever is what we were talking about. Those moments in our lives, as you look back, you have forever moments, times when you just go, that was really something. That was so meaningful. That was a pivot point. That changed my life. And obviously for Christians, it's when Christ tapped you on the shoulder and just said, do you mind if I just hug you?
Right.
And so those moments add up, and they actually, to me, are those milestones. Yes, but there's often a change into another phase of life. So I put this musical into 5 different stages of life, and you'll get to know them, and you'll be able to get to see, no matter where you are, you'll get to see what's coming up, or you'll be able to say, I just went through that. I just went through the point where I've been very ambitious. I'm going from ambitious to trying to find purpose. I think that's a natural pivot point for many, many people. And I love that stage because it's when we really start to author. You look at where author comes from, and it's the word authority is in it. You know what I mean? And you realize that there's a grand author, and you realize, what is it? And of course, that gets into what everybody knows as calling. And so that's one of the stages. And so trying to put music into context. I think some of the greatest music does have some kind of context, and praise or worship music automatically has the context of communion, singing with others, and that's why I love so many of those. And there are some phenomenal writers, and I had the pleasure of doing all my work in Nashville. I've spent my track of my career in and around some very great players, and they're not necessarily famous, but they're all highly professional. So this ended up being a synergy. I started bringing people in, and I soon realized this is not my solo project. This is taking on a life of its own. The Lord is revealing to me along the way, do this, Bill. Have you thought about this? And in each of those steps, I realized, well, this is a collaborative, meaning it is where I'm getting so much perspective and input and elevation. In other words, the Holy Spirit's at work. You can see it in the relationships. And at some point I was just sitting back in a session going, my observer self was looking at it going, wow. So I realized I wanted to give it a moniker, a name, and it's called The Next Humanity. So if you look for the music, it's going to be found as The Next Humanity. Now that, again, is a reference for me that he brought us the new creation, the new covenant. And this music is different. You'll find it in the way it's storytelling. You'll also find it in the way you'll sometimes hard to figure out stylistically, because sometimes it's orchestrated. So some people say, oh, that's kind of classical. Well, okay, well, so is a lot of cinema scoring these days, you know what I mean? So that made sense. Some of it is more intimate, piano vocal even. So I've tried to do some things that are new. I am trying to take it to the street. In other words, I want the spiritually curious to find this stuff. And I'm getting some of the spiritually curious, and I'm getting some of the spiritually antagonistic.
Sure.
So you can imagine, just as you've probably seen the trolls and the detractors and the Nietzscheites, God is dead, and all the other things that come at you, and you just kind of go, well, I guess he told me to be prepared for this, and I'm okay. These are pinpricks as far as slings and arrows. I'm not taking any great persecution, but I'm actually kind of feeling validated when some of that stuff happens.
Yeah.
Hopefully
Well,
I'm
let
saying
me
the
ask
same
you
thing.
this, Bill. Why did you choose the podcast medium? Why a
Great
podcast?
question, because I think you're my sister in this next humanity. What I'm talking about, bringing Christ forward in these times. And we all know that there's, as James Poulos in a book called Human Forever, he expresses, he happens to be an Orthodox believer. He expresses it as the digital swarm, the barrage, you might say. So our modern lives have changed so much. The music business, as well as the church and other institutions, be an institution as government, media, structures of the military, or other social control, or you can look at institutions as far as like the institution of marriage, the institutions of that hold our fabric of society together. They've been unable to adapt. The music business was shocked by Napster. They should have seen it coming. I spoke on a panel with the Bursar of Copyrights and the Time Warner lead counsel and somebody back in the early 90s, and I was talking about the emergence of digital, and we were recognizing that kind of shift. And it ended up being seismic, and industry was caught off guard very much. And it led to kind of a commoditization of the music business. So we live now in this omnipresent window to the world. And it's also a mirror. It can be a mirror into our own souls. It kind of came, if we think about the progression of things, the way we understood the Lord way back in pastoral times was through that agricultural lens. And even so much of the Bible, of course, is told and parables shared in amazing, if you can strip back the context of that agricultural mind, you still see the underlying stories. That's what makes the Bible transcendent of any age, any newfangledness. But then, we got into the age of enlightenment and in the mechanized world, so Gutenberg's press came along, and suddenly, we have a new, broader understanding. People can be more, and it's no wonder that the Reformation came about, and the concept of we don't have to have the intermediary. We can have a personal relationship and know his love through, like I said, the many appearances and the way that God reveals. He doesn't just tap us on the back and tell us, although one of my songs is clearly about me hearing the voice of God. And I thought I was nuts. I thought, that can't be, And in fact, I was very glad to hear a young lady come forward in her testimony within our church and say that thing. And she happens to be a cellist. And I went up to her and hugged her to say, "You're not crazy."
Wow.
It happens. And just as today, prophets weren't just back in the day. Prophet was somebody who has a conversation with God all the time, and God reveals. So with that said, we get to the industrial age. Here we are then in radio and television, right? So back then, we still took time out for listening, whether it's sitting in front of, everybody I know loves the Christmas Story, Ralphie. And there he was running to sit in front of the radio during Orphan Annie. And so that's changed. A new media is this instantaneous world, and it's all-encompassing. It's actually engulfing us. And I think this creates a great opportunity. It creates a democratization of the Lord, just like it has been a democratization of media for you, that you can have a show, but that your show can be capsulized. And you've made thinking of a big part of how we gather our wits and how we present to the world we don't have to defend God, really. He doesn't have a problem doing that. His consequences of sin, it's built in, right? But he does need us professing. He does need us being the examples, the witnesses, and to the point where somebody says, what is it about these people? And some of it will be, they just don't give up. I turn around and they're always saying something about hope. How can they be that positive? And let them think we're nuts in that level. So I think it gives us testimony opportunity, and whether that is in sound bites, memes, or whether it is in longer form, however it is, and it shouldn't just be sending out a bunch of Hallmark cards, but you know what I mean? We want to build genuineness into it. We want to build, they're real people. Oh, they suffer, but yet they have something to say about it. I think of your podcast, and I think Therefore I Am, and then I heard, might have been Ellis Potter that I was recently reading, said something. It's more like I hurt, therefore I am. In order to understand that this is the world we're in. You know what I mean? That there's pain and that there's suffering, and yet once we look outside ourselves and we look at others, that gives us a context to go, I don't have it so bad. Or to hear a story like Viktor Frankl, who goes through a concentration camp, and what did it take to go through that? Well, it took embracing the good. It took remaining faithful. And so I am charged with why I'm doing this thing. I think is kind of what you were asking. And you can hear it's my account for my choices in life. So it's kind of what people can do for themselves. And I don't say, hey, look at me and my story. I say more like, look at a really good, bad example at times, but also look at someone who's gone through, and you're going through whatever you're going through, and you too can write your own story. You can rewrite your story. You can redirect. There's a really cool movie I just stumbled on called Rewrite, and it had that redemptive quality in it. So when I find something like that from Hollywood, I have to share. So I also want to have others benefit from the art. I hope you're entertained by As I Recall Forever. Snuck the title in there again. I hope in some way you're enlightened by it. Obviously, I do it to be closer to their creator himself, because as I create, I was asked to join an advisory board, not their board of directors, but an advisory board to a Kansas City troupe of dancers. And it's a little school for dance, and they have shows that they put on that go the range of studio level, 100 people audiences on up to a couple thousand people in the Kansas City Arts, or I should say Performing Arts Center. So they're really doing some wonderful things, and it's a Christian-based organization. And at the surface, it's not the top of the banner, you know what I mean? But it's always the underlying theme of what they're doing. So it's a really ingenious thing, and it's part of what I was inspired to do. There's a particular man who's an artist. It's Makoto Fujimura, and he is well known for his art and faith. I want to call it almost a homily. The book tells you really about how to bring it to the general market. And so that's part of what I wanted to do. I also, it's going to be an artifact in my family. So some of it was just so that we have, with media, you have the ability to leave a digest of your life in some point, this cross-section of people you spoke to, and your great-great-great-grandkids can look back on this stuff and go, wow, I know my family more. I know the heritage of Christ is, in fact, active belief. Yeah, the core is faith. So, yeah, and ultimately to receive God's revealings, to experience the Holy Spirit. And
fascinating.
Yeah, well, okay, so that now you know about me, and hopefully it's wacky enough. I think of Johnny Appleseed often. Did you learn of Johnny Appleseed in school? I'm just wondering whether okay, good.
Yes.
So he's
homeschooled. Also remember teaching my kids about Johnny Appleseed, all the trees.
Mythical character. And you think about what he does, and this is for everybody. I don't even know. I don't know how many people will have. We're approaching, 1,000 folks on YouTube, and we're getting some numbers, but it's not, you know, big time at all. But if it were to be, that would be fine. I'd welcome it. But at the same time, it's kind of like Johnny Appleseed, I want to inspire others. I hope some other musicians, creators see what I'm doing and go, that's kind of cool, putting it into an episodic serial.
Right.
And yet,
are there other podcast musicals, Bill, that you're aware of?
I will admit that there's one that I heard while I was putting this together. I just thought, I would look up to see if anybody else is doing this. And it was a group out of New York, and they were like out of Brooklyn or someplace like that. And it was a small troupe of actors, and they had interjected music, but it was done at a level that was, of course, budget level, meaning just a piano and the singers. They did a good job. That it was a very secular theme, and in fact, one that I felt a little disappointed, I guess, because it was basically about a couple finally getting to the point where they were both so selfish they had to break up. So
Okay.
I'm sorry, folks, to be putting it so bluntly, but it left me there. So no, I don't know of anything that is done at this level. It's really world class. I wanted to do something. If it's worth doing, it's worth going big or going home. That expression.
Right. Is there a set number of episodes? Will there be a set number?
Yeah, 13 in all. And within each, you could even pause it because there are 2 songs and therefore 2 scenes, so to speak, and 2 narratives, me speaking to set up the song, playing the song, and then a little post commentary around it. And then there's a break. So you could break it into shorter than the 20-minute type segment into 10 minutes, so it could be almost right on the heels of your devotional, or go from it to devotional or something like that, or while you work out, or all those types of, while you're on the drive, commutes to work and all that sort of thing. So I hope it works out that way. I do have, I have a love for vinyl, and I have friends that are vinyl nuts, and I just connected with a fella who has Christian vinyl, which is in of itself a unique business, because vinyl is not just that it sounds a certain way. And man, I had one of the best mastering engineers put this together, Bernie Grundman, who has done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hits in terms of making it give it that final gloss, that final, oh man, it's so silky smooth. So yeah.
So 13 total episodes.
13 episodes, yeah. And also, of course, if you want to go to YouTube, I think you'll be happy with seeing some of the videos, because I really do videos that put the songs, give them a greater context. Some of them have the lyrics, so you can actually hear what I'm saying. And, I don't have Everything is Spiritual, one of my favorite songs, which is almost it is the pinnacle song in this, where the character ultimately gets to the point that I'm talking about, where just going down the street, people, you can see the souls in people. You're looking at expressions. It goes back to that old American Indian saying, I believe, because they were so strongly attached to their other tribalness that if you didn't acknowledge them in passing, they became invisible. And so I think that's a good thing to remember as other cultures. That's the great thing about Christianity. It's not the great thing about Christianity. It's the great thing about Christ. Let me restate that.
Yeah.
He adapts to any culture. And that's the beauty. And we can have him adapt to this new digital culture. And so that's part of my mission.
I have another question also, Bill. If I'm not mistaken, at least in some of the literature I've seen, and maybe even on the podcast itself, as the title, you have parentheses in the word forever. Was that intentional?
It was a lot of help from some brilliant design folks.
So what does that mean?
Yeah, well,
it's in the word forever, right? The O is like the two parentheses.
F-O is in fact 2 parenthesis signs.
Right.
Okay. And so it's a combination. The folks at the Design Ranch in Kansas City, a wonderful house, and they do things like for the arts organization in town and other arts related retreats, camps, and things that, so they're just really in the stream of art. And obviously, therefore, quite creative. And they were hearing my songs every other day or so. I would send the songs over so they could listen and hear what it's about as they started to create branding and imagery. And in a short comment, I'll say I sent one song over, and it's a story called "Make Me Aware" about a young boy with a learning disability. And so I come to the meeting, and the art director goes, "Man, that story hit home." Oh, I just like, and I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, my son's dyslexic." It was like, okay, my job's done.
Right.
He does. A young boy can realize he's not alone and realize he can prevail. And so these folks were getting a strong sense of me. That was the point of that story. And again, it was like what I was praying for, that they see the Lord and themselves in a little different light, or at least. And so in another part of the story, I talk about a Jewish Hasidic rabbi, or maybe he wasn't a rabbi. Yeah, he was. He was traveling to Kansas City. He was on the plane with me, and at the carousel for baggage, he turns me on to a book called Towards a Meaningful Life. I'd shared with him that, I was at the end of my career, and I'm looking where I'm going next. And he said, "You'll love this." And so the rabbi in that book that it's about expressed different chapters, different aspects of life. And one was on retirement, and the opening was, retire from what? Life. And so in that book, I came to learn why they spell God G-D. In other words, it's all part of Yahweh. Yahweh. We don't say the name of the Lord. We're so quiet because we don't know what it's about yet. You know what I'm saying? So again, for me, it's a reverence symbol. And for me, I go, well, if the Jews have that going on, I'm going to use that because, hey, I'm a Jew too. I follow a Jew.
That's right.
Yes. So the whole point of that parentheses that these folks came up with, well, it's what forever is, right? It is a greatness like the Lord, and yet it's a mystery like the Lord. It's something that we are, Ephesians says, "I will place eternity into your heart." It's kind of like he took a pen and just dipped it, in my heart, and I'm supposed to write with it now. So yeah, when they did that, I went, wow. It's not just left open for interpretation, it's left open for curiosity. What is this guy doing? Right. I've started to write God that way. So
why not?
It's not a gimmick. It is an artistic symbol, to me now. So that we can actually look at those forever moments in our lives and see the trajectory. No matter how many, if you draw that map of your life, no matter how many times it goes down and you have to start over again, and maybe it's down now, you still can see that those add up to a trajectory, and that trajectory is with him. That is what he promised, So
that's beautiful.
Thanks, because it's been beautiful to me. In other words, I couldn't share any of this unless the Lord had moved me to get beyond myself, try to capsulize something. But again, I want it to be a point of. So in closing, I'll just mention that I was about to release this, and suddenly I had to go to the hospital for open heart surgery.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I came through it. I mean, it was caught just in time.
When was that?
That was last Good Friday. Okay. Imagine all the things that I've looked at, what the Lord has done for me throughout my life. And there I am in a life-threatening situation. And I'm going, Lord, It couldn't be a better day. You defeated death this day. I'm yours. I surrender. And man, that I Surrender All song, it's a beautiful thing in terms of a conversion or transformation. But that was a point where it was like, even after the operation, it was so painful that, I'm saying the same thing. If the fix doesn't work, then you're still here, right? Okay, good. So after recovery, of course, we have people coming out, some from the church. One of the pastors was commenting about, he knew what my work was, and he was asking about it. My wife said, well, Bill, I think God had something else in mind for you. He wants something else. And that's when I realized, okay, I've got all of this. I'm going to do something else. And part of that is I've gotten to know people like yourself, and I have started to do almost mini workshop recordings. One of them was a guy who specializes in finding your calling. Another one is a man who wrote a very well-known book called The Experience Economy, and that was foundationally about how you no longer should sell at people, advertise at people, market at people. You should involve them. You should bring them into an experience. And as you bring them into your experience, then you could get to know them better and understand what their needs are and really serve them with what they're looking for, rather than just try to use techniques. Anyway, so now Joe Pine is the second episode of that. And so that's a whole nother set of almost like takeaways from the musical.
Right. I have one final question too, Bill, that while you were talking and sharing your heart and your story and the background even to this podcast musical, you mentioned his hope in your songs. And then again, you mentioned hope. I can't now remember what you said, but I had just scribbled that down in my notes, because hope is something that a lot of people don't have, and they don't even know really where to find it. And even though they may be Christ followers, it can be a little bit elusive. They can be just that discouraged. So what would you say to maybe just a member or two of our audience who says, I don't have much hope right now. How can I find that hope? And I have a feeling that hope has been something very important to you personally. But could you speak just a little bit to hope?
Well, I know who you are. He knows who you are. That's how I can say that. I have suffered. And you'll hear some of it, and you'll hear how I was given hope. I was given averting suicide. I was given coming through other grief and other despair and other times and it gets almost to the border of morose.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, oh my gosh, Mullin, life is hard and it's not fair. And it's not necessarily meant to be fair. At the same time, there's poetic justice. There's his justice, which is that poetic justice. And if you turn it over, if you stop thinking about it, what I mean by that, and it's funny, I'll put this in the context of your show, which is about choosing to think. I will say choose actually at some point not to think. In other words, thinking is a left brain process of trying to sort things out, and yet God is beyond that. God is beyond belief. Belief is still trying to rationalize. Belief is still trying to figure something out. But there's something that's beyond belief, and that is faith. And it's hard for somebody going through something to come to that state of being. And it is a state of being. It's not trying to rationalize our way at all. It's about saying, you're greater than me, but I long for you to reveal. And he will. He does. You'll get those moments when you'll go, and some of it's in silence. Some of it is in the midst of something else going on. I think it's often in relationships. So no matter what you're doing, don't become isolated in your hurt. Don't become insulated from your hurt. And one of my lines in one of my songs is, you'll never lose what you put inside when it seals up like a drum. You store fears and tears for many years to come. We all do that. In some degree, I'm even doing it now, trying to avoid hurt, to bottle up. And so we need to let that go, and you'll see it in my videos on YouTube, The Next Humanity. And I only say that to, yes, try and let you know I get it. And those relationships are what I have had, and this is something I wouldn't trade for any amount of money. Like I say, I hope this does well enough to cover itself, and well enough for me to continue and to bring these thought leaders together that can, again, if people listen to it and go, what do I make of this? What do I do with this? Then I want to be able to tag on to that. Here's what you can do. You can have one of these workshops about calling, or you can go over here and learn about transformation. Or you could, you know what I mean?
Right.
Or you could learn how to not seek help for yourself, but the seeking help for yourself is as taking it to help others. That you become your mini ministry, and you can do that person, whoever it is, going through that pain or that absence. And so I'm blessed in two ways. I'll talk about a little bit about how it happened to me over the last year, that reshaping of going from, I mentioned pre-show, being on the response team, and from the response team looking for that one sheep, and then, because altar call is all fine and well, but it's not me. I'm on a one-to-one. I love talking to you because it's us and it can get intimate. And so you get my point. And that led to the homeless, and that led to individuals. I no longer was just serving on a breakfast line. I no longer was just handing out some clothes at the park. I was like a brother,
Right.
And once they became my equal, quote unquote, then I wasn't helping them. I was being a friend. I point that out to say you can do this, meaning just to get involved. And I think a church is a wonderful platform for it, because a lot of people have made the reference that churches are like hospitals. If you want to find people who are sinners, you're going to find the best.
Right.
If you want to find people that are hurting and suffering, you're going to find it. Because we've reached a point at church where we all say, I am so broken that I give up. I give up. And once you get there, you're not giving up to say, I'm going to extinguish myself. You're saying, Jesus, take the wheel.
Take over.
And so he does. And like I said, I found it in those individual three men that you might say in some cases mentored, meaning they needed sponsors. And I said, well, I'm not really a sponsor as in terms of addiction. You need somebody who's squarely in it versus me, who's just been through it. And discipling, it's an opportunity to reveal yourself to somebody so that they reveal back. And this is all kind of counseling almost levels, but it's not. It's more just like, well, you're my brother. Yeah, okay. You're 25 years younger than me, but you're my brother. So these are the things I can only share that I think are environments to put yourself in. Get over yourself is what the Lord wants you to do. And so much of my downtime, it was kind of a self-pity of, why is this happening to me?
Right.
And yeah, it's happening to us, but we have to, you'll hear about a son of mine that ran away and became homeless. And you'll hear about why I'm dealing with the homeless, because a friend of mine said, Bill, you can't help your son, but you're going to help somebody else's. And I thought, well, thanks. I needed that encouragement, because I was still in heartbroken despair. So, many people in good churches ready to help, but at the same time, He's ready to help. And you just have to have that yearning to beseech. That's an old, I don't like getting too much religiosity into what I'm doing, and because I want people to hear it in plain English. But beseeching is one of those words that have come down to us because it means you're seeking, but it means you're being of a seeking mind. And so once you get to the point where your faith is being of Him, then you want to get into, I want to learn more. I want to learn more about hope because I see a glimmer of it. I want to know about, here we go, I get, long suffering because I've been suffering. Oh, there's a whole set of things called the fruit of the Spirit. What is that about? Well, above all, it's about love. And God is love. And if you are feeling hopeless, maybe because you don't feel lovable and you are loved. And not only are you loved, but there's a whole set of people who, when God came to earth as man, we've seen God's love. It is so clear in what Christ did at the cross.
Amen.
And was able to say, forgive you while it was being inflicted, the humiliation, the hurt, the betrayal. We do that. We as humans do that every day. And yet, those who see that redemption that He gave us at the cross, meaning, what is redemption? It's to be with Him forever. If you've heard the term always and forever and thought, that's so wonderful. Yeah, that's Him. So that's what I have to say. I have a friend who goes, that's my spiel, and I'm sticking to it. It's not a spiel. You can hear it from me that you become Him. And so you want to study the character. And I have a song right now that I'm writing called The Character of Christ.
Nice.
And that's what we want, not just to emulate, but to have that point of being indwelt, to have it in the fabric, the fiber of our being.
Yeah. Amen. So beautiful. And Bill, I applaud your efforts, and it's extremely intriguing. I hope that every single viewer or listener will rush out today and, first of all, find your podcast on Apple Podcasts. It's right there.
Yeah, and of course you'll find it on all the music services if you look for The Next Humanity.
Yes.
Particularly the YouTube videos have taken off.
Yeah, let's go YouTube.
Yeah, that's where I've been down here in Florida, it's been a retreat for both my wife and I, a resetting, of course, and I have 10 videos that I did 95% of putting together and work with a videographer who helped me part of the way. I have a song called...
And what is your YouTube channel called?
The Next Humanity.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
That is the YouTube channel as well, The Next Humanity.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm really pleased.
Podcast, As I Recall Forever.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm pleased with the song I just got put out called Silence, and it's called God is in Between. And
love it.
In the end, it comes back to what I was saying. That's the beautiful thing, folks, who are looking for, if you have a hole in your heart, if you have a broken heart, He knows what to do with broken things.
Yeah, that's right.
Where was I going with that? He really come back to engaging with others. It's all about the best way we can show the world. We want to change the world. Show it in your neighborhood. Just show it with the next folks you encounter. And that is His love. Of
so
all the
good.
fruit of the Spirit, that tops it because He said He is love. It's not just an attribute. Mercy, grace, peace, all of the things that are gifts from God. Courage. I don't think courage comes from us. I think courage is directly a gift, just like creativity, as
Bestows.
a radio announcer once said, loans to us. Okay.
Yep.
And so, yeah, you can hear at the music services, Spotify, Apple, and also on the podcast platforms. And you can come to the website, either asIrecallforever.com gets you there, or thenexthumanity.com gets you there. And you'll see our videos there as well. But Silence is really a cool video because it's about relationships. Seeing God in relationships is really what he told us when he said, love thy neighbor, when he said, love God. He could have said a third thing, like, now go find the suffering. Now go. Now go,
Right.
Now go. He did say that, but he said it in a different context. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Bill, so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for this time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much. God bless you and your ministry.
God bless everyone. And please do something about it.
That's right.
Do something about your blessings.
That's right.